Yeah, the first time that I ever took it, I'm sure you too, that was the most descriptive anybody got, is Molly.
Yeah.
And
that's what I thought I was taking the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, if somebody had said you're taking methalone, I would have been like, shit.
Well, if they had explained this is a hybrid between an amphetamine and
But this is
MDMA.
why this is, why, like...
That's why drug experience is important.
Yeah.
You learn to ask the right questions.
Experience and, exactly. Just know what you're taking.
Welcome into All In with Adam. What episode is this?
10.
10. You got episode 10. That's a pretty cool one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's weird. I know that before you.
I know. Well, I ended up taking last week off. It's weird doing like varying topics because some of them are a lot harder than others. Like meaning and morality. That one was like exhausting.
How long did you have to research for that one?
I mean,
I'm sure it's something
31
you're
years.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm sure it's something you're already like constantly thinking about all the time. But
yeah,
there's got to be some type of like, all right, this is what I'm going to prepare. Like, this is how I'm going to go through it.
Yeah, that one has to be careful because there's certain, and I had to like go back and punch in like at least 2 or 3 times to be like, oh, I didn't say this thing, and I had to, with real like technical philosophy, I always feel like I have to be very careful because you can't ignore that there's this argument and then there's this argument, and it's makes it a lot more stressful. And this is not, I don't look at this as like a stressful project. It's pretty laid back.
Yeah.
But this would be a cool one too. It's nice having friends on because a lot of times, the monologues get it's just a lot to sit down and talk for that long,
Sure. Well, yeah, man. First, I would like to just say congrats to you, man.
Thanks, dude.
You're a
hitched up,
dude. A married man. How do you feel? Anything
Good.
different?
Not well. This is a weird example.
You're a husband now, dude.
I know.
You're a husband.
I know. Well, it's a weird analogy, but like, remember on the front porch, we have like a high front porch at this house, and I built a fence that goes along the porch, but because the porch was always so high. Nobody notices the fence because it's like it was always supposed to have a fence, and so it looks like it was supposed to be that way, and it's almost, I don't want to say underwhelming, but like it's not as big of a deal as you'd think because it's how it ought to be, and that's what it feels like to marry somebody you've been with for 8 years and own a house with. Is like, well, we could have done this 3 years ago, and it kind of like we're already doing all the stuff, so it's
just
not like
putting a title to it.
Yeah, just the title. And boyfriend and girlfriend feels real dumb after 8 years.
Yeah,
it just feels like,
for sure.
But
yeah, I mean, just congrats too. I mean, it's funny just because when we met. 8 years ago, 9 years ago, kind of around the same time I think you met Kelly. It was around that same time. But
you and I met just before 6 months or a year before we met Kelly.
But yeah, I've seen you go from living in a house with 3 other people, working at Sam Ash to you've got you own your own house, husband, yard full of chickens and dogs.
Yeah, so, man.
Congrats on winning at life so far, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, we mentioned just the other day. I was looking for older photos of us, and Kelly and I mentioned that you were at the party where we met. You were definitely at that. It was like, wasn't it Paul's birthday party?
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
wild house, wasn't it?
Yeah, crazy times for sure. Crazy night. Yeah, that was a fun night. I don't remember too much about it though. That's for sure.
There were so many similar ones. This was like, it wasn't necessarily a party house, but if there was a party, it was at that house. It was a very social house, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny. One thing I remember about that house and about an early thing in like in our relationship, an interesting change that you went through, this was like years ago, was when we were, okay, so you were dating a girl, you've been together a couple years, but then when you guys broke up, it was interesting because you decided to do like a lot of really cool, like healthy changes, which is interesting because breakups can go either way. Like sometimes people just nosedive and do a bunch of horrible, stupid things, like you enter a new party phase, or you end up like a hookup phase, or you rebound super, super hard and go down that road. But it was interesting because your response to that breakup was like you started working out, you got into like nutrition and fitness, you took up tennis, like there were like several. Not
quit
all at
smoking
once.
cigarettes.
Quit smoking cigarettes. It was like this big bundle of like, fuck it, we're doing something different now.
I feel like I'm lucky to have like, I know a lot of people don't have that aspect, but I feel like I'm lucky to have kind of that perspective on when I go through anything shitty in life.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like my mindset is like, well, I'm already feeling really bad right now.
Yeah.
So I might as well make all these other changes on things that I'm not happy with, you know, that...
Sure. Just lean in.
So exactly. Like, I know I'm going to feel shitty for the next few months. Might as well just feel extra shitty for the next few months and come out the other side, you know, with like... you know, because your time eventually is going to heal everything, right? Most everything.
Relationship stuff especially, right? Time just fixes
makes it easier at least. So, you know, you're eventually going to come out of that. And, you know, why not come out of that with a handful of other really great things to go along with it, you know?
It's weird that that's like, we've definitely talked about this before, that sometimes that's innate. Like, you almost can't help it. That's just what happens. But for me, it's more of like a learned thing to look at it that way. Because as like very much like a natural alcoholic, like it's a lot easier to like kick myself while I'm down. That's way like, oh shit sucks, like bet I can fuck it up even worse, you know, for some reason. But it's also like, I've talked about this with Kelly before too. It's like one little area where she's guilty of doing this. Everybody has it. Like when you feel bad, you eat bad food. Right, like that sort of thing, where it's like, I feel sick, let me eat some ramen noodle. Like, dude, that's trash. Like, that's the opposite of what you should do. Yeah. It's
funny. I was actually thinking about that this morning. The old days where we used to hit the gym every morning.
Yeah.
I thought about that for some reason when I was getting coffee, and I was like, I remember for some reason, do you remember when we used to go every morning and we would get coffee before the gym every morning?
Yeah, to LA Fitness?
LA Fitness, 4 days a week.
Man.
And I just remember getting like the looks from everybody when we brought coffee in. Do you remember that?
We would bring hot coffee, which for some reason is like, nobody likes that. We never cared. We were like, what the fuck?
Everybody thought it was like macchiato, like frappuccino stuff, but we were really just getting black coffee.
We just got black coffee.
But people thought we were bringing sugary drinks into the gym. And...
Yeah. That was a weird gym. Remember, there were... I remember one really funny story. Okay, you know those situations where, you know what I'm talking about too, where somebody says something and then you think of what would have been the perfect thing to say after. And we would have so many funny conversations of like, after this one time, this guy came up and he tried to like make a correction to my form that was like really not necessary. Like maybe kind of sort of from his angle, I could have lifted my elbow a little higher, and I don't know what the exercise was, but it was like, it was totally unnecessary. It was like, come on, dude.
You don't want anybody doing that to you in the gym, period.
Unless I'm about to like really fuck myself up. Like, just leave me alone in the gym, you know?
Yeah.
But, man, I remember whatever he said was something along the lines of like, hey, man, if you do like a little 5-degree turn here at the top and then you do that, it's like really better for you. Like, okay, all right. And
just walking around personal training everybody.
Yeah. And I remember we had joked after, how funny would it have been to say to that guy, like, hey man, well, while I got you here, you know, an expert right in front of me, like, I got a question for you. You know, if you're like really feeling it and you're just like right in the middle of your exercise and you're just like in the fucking zone, and then some douchebag walks up and gives you form advice, like, what do I do in that situation? You know?
Just put him on the spot, make him feel like a complete asshole.
Yeah. Oh man, but that was our like bodybuilding. I don't want to call it a phase, but kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, for sure. For 2 years, and I appreciate it too, because that was, I feel like you, I think you had gone to the gym for a while with somebody else. You've been involved with it for a long time, but that was kind of that was my first big bout with the gym, early 20s, and knew really nothing about technique or the machines or anything. We went 4 or 5 days a week for 2 years straight. And, you got me really into it, helped me with technique, YouTube stuff. And ever since then, I've just been trying to every week, and I mean, I appreciate that, helping me get started with all of that. But
it's also, it taps into that teacher thing though, where like I learned by talking about it, and all about that. It's like, it's enjoyable to teach, in that it makes me have to like, do I actually know what I'm talking about here? Sometimes you don't. Did you ever find with bodybuilding that this is a weird one, but like, did you ever find that it normalized talking about your body? Because that's not a thing that a lot of men do growing up. But like in the bodybuilding world, it is very normal to like critique your own body and discuss what you like and don't like about it, which is not really a normal thing that guys are taught to do. Like we don't really normally think about it, but like bodybuilding makes you do that sometimes, right? Like, do you like the shape of your chest?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Or like, I don't know, just talking about weird stuff or thinking about parts of your body that, you know, you would never talk about. I don't know. We in the gym, man, I can't remember things we've talked about, but it definitely certain times that I have to stop and be like, oh, that was kind of a weird comment. I kind of talked about my ass growing bigger or something to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just something weird like that. Where I'm like, okay, that was weird, but
it's also not. It's just part of the part. Like if you came to me with like, bro, I've really been thinking a lot about my calves recently. It's like not weird.
Like, dude, at the bottom of your squat, I'm noticing like a butt wink.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, man. It's funny, but I don't know. I almost enjoy it because that's not the full like correct way to say it, but it almost makes you like, I don't want to say more comfortable with your sexuality because it's non-sexual, but there is something to like normalizing, like you can talk about your body like objectively and just make it what you want it to be, and it's totally non-sexual. It's not weird. It's not gay. It's none of those things. You know, it's just it is what it is. Yeah, it's a strange part of the fitness world, though, for sure. And you eventually grew out of that, right?
What, bodybuilding?
Yeah, or you just lost interest over time?
I constantly come back to it, but I mean, so when I started doing that, for I'd say 4 or 5 months, once you get over that initial shock to the body, you know, where it's like every week you're sore.
Destroyed.
You start accumulating this insane amount of energy during the day where you're just, you know, especially if you have never worked out consistently like that, I feel like you have this abundance of energy. And I was like, you know, I got to put this somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember one Saturday we went to Walmart and got tennis rackets. Do you remember that? And we were like, let's just go play. And we were just like hitting it around and looking stupid, but I don't know, it just stuck, and I started going out every Saturday with my roommate.
Yeah.
That evolved to
Brother Pete.
Yep, Brother Pete. But that evolved to finding other people to hit with, and eventually got into playing 4 or 5 times a week and competing in tournaments and taking lessons and getting real serious about it. Just because, you know, I never could find a form of cardio that, you know, I could consistently do and enjoy.
Yeah. And treadmills suck.
Yeah, or just running. I'm just not a big fan of running or, you know, anything like that. So this kind of allowed me to get my cardio in. You know, I enjoyed it, and I'd be out there for 1-2 hours every time, you know, running. But I love to compete, so you know, it would really push me anyway. So I got into that, and then bodybuilding, I don't know, it was I like aesthetically kind of what it does for me.
Sure.
But performance-wise, I felt like I needed something more to kind of enhance my performance out on the court. So I kind of switched over to CrossFit for a while, which I loved a lot just because it's a social aspect to it. There's a competition aspect to it, so it would help push me a little bit.
A little more structured too. You don't have to make everything up all the time.
Yeah, and you have a kind of a personal trainer, which I guess it depends on your gym, how good your personal trainer is there.
You made friends with the guy.
Yeah,
wasn't that a student's dad kind of thing?
Yeah, I traded personal training sessions for teaching his daughter for a while.
It's so sick when that stuff happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it was cool. So I got one-on-one sessions with him. Plus, he would walk around the gym during CrossFit and kind of help people out with their form and stuff. Really knowledgeable
huge
guy,
too, wasn't he? He was like a beast of a dude.
Yeah, really great guy. I mean, the only con to that is just expensive. You know, I mean, it was like $180 a month.
Yeah, that's pretty high, given that you can jump around your backyard for free. And
yeah. So, I eventually, I mean, I'm kind of back into doing the bodybuilding, kind of into doing yoga. I'm doing some knee rehab now because doing tennis 5 days a week for years.
Yeah.
The pounding on the concrete, the stopping, the turning.
Do you feel like you did anything wrong in tennis, or is it just that like we're 30 plus and that's a lot of jumping and turning and
tennis
pounding?
is like, I mean, knee injuries are very common in tennis, especially if you play kind of like I do, where I'm very much they call them a grinder.
Okay.
They're just kind of in the back of the court, grinding it out, running. Like,
gotcha.
Like, you don't really like to end points very quick. You're a defensive player. You're just kind of running all over the place.
Gotcha.
Counter-striking kind of,
and know? So that's like a more active play style? Yeah,
because there's some players who will, they'll hit more aggressive and set up a shot to where they can run up to the net in the point really quick.
Gotcha.
I'm kind of more, like I was saying, just kind of grind it out.
Sure.
Obviously try to get aggressive when I can, but I mainly rely on my counter striking and running ability. So that's just not good on the knees.
Puts the miles on.
Yeah, but not good on the knees, So most players who are like that kind of end up having problems with their knees. So so yeah, I don't know, man. It started where my knee was hurting the day after I'd play, and then it started getting where it would hurt right after. And now it's gotten where it hurts during tennis.
Yeah.
It's something I gotta address before I get older, and so I'm starting to take rehab kind of serious. Starting to do some yoga and some I guess they call them Rehab sessions.
Of course, yeah.
And then I got a physical therapist I'm gonna start seeing soon. So
that's cool. It does suck to have to think about this shit, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it sucks, right?
In
where
your 30s,
injuries.
But I feel like 30s are that time where it's like, all right, you got to address it now, because when you get in your 40s, your 50s, it's permanent or like surgery.
Yeah.
At this point, we can do physical therapy and things to, I guess,
help
certain problems like that.
We still have some recovery ability. Yeah, it's just fascinating though, because I remember growing up skateboarding and quite literally jumping off of staircases 20, 30 times a day, maybe 100 times a day. I don't know. I mean, that was like the whole plan for the day. Saturday, what are we doing? Jumping down staircase, right? I mean,
all day, yeah.
Shit, I wouldn't do it once now. I wouldn't do that one time for fear of getting injured. And that was my whole day growing, or the whole weekend, and even like just getting absolutely demolished, like big swollen knees and twisted ankles and cuts and bruises, and I got stitches and broken bones and all sorts of injuries. Just all fine, turned out fine. You just heal up. It's just weird how kids have this ability. I don't know, they're just like in so many ways tougher than adults, where I feel more fragile now.
Yeah.
Where it's like if something breaks, it might stay broken. That's what could happen,
Yep.
It's very weird to make peace with that in your head.
Yeah, it's weird. This whole year has been kind of me realizing that with my knee. My, I was telling you, my teeth, got like, kind of slacked on the dentist the past few years. Got a whole bunch of stuff I got to catch up on with that. It's weird, man. My hands like have been getting weird things, like my thumb on my phone.
Yeah.
The slider phone. I'm like, oh, what is this ache in my thumb? And then certain things with guitar, man, recently, I don't know. It's been really weird. It's past like 6 months have been. So with students, when I go around to students, I have to bring my acoustic guitar because I don't really want to lug around my electric and my amp and all of that.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
So on acoustics, the strings are thicker. They're bigger gauges. So
more pressing, more muscles in your hand.
Well, yeah, the strings are just bigger. They're harder to manipulate, but the bigger the string, the bigger the tone. And acoustic guitar, you're mainly strumming or plucking. You're not manipulating the strings very much. Like an electric guitar, you'd
bend a lot.
You would bend or do vibratos and stuff. Problem is, though, a lot of my students are electric guitarists, and we'll be going through bending exercises, and so I'll sit there and bend on these heavy. Yeah, doing that for 5 or 6 years, man, has really been wear and tear.
Interesting.
Just got a lot of wear and tear on a couple of my fingers, and I'm really starting to feel these aches in my fingers. Like feel like they're in the bone almost. It's like kind of scary.
Weird.
Or I'd like have to completely stop bending on my acoustic guitar now.
Yeah, that's an unnatural motion to like press and bend with your hand. I could see that being just a weird type of muscle use, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It's also the past few weeks I've been noticing huge gains in speed. So I don't know if it's like a muscle that is sore that's like healing back and I'm going to get like faster now or
That's
something.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's strange. I'd like if there are other guitarists out there, I'd like to see if anybody else has had anything like this. You know?
Yeah.
It'd be cool if anybody listens to this, ever had something like that happen.
Yeah. It's always weird because especially playing music, you know, like hands are this scary little category. Like a cut can mess you up for weeks and weeks. A tiny little thing, like a broken finger, could mess you up and it's really not that different for drums. You know, same sort of thing. A broken finger, a sprained wrist is like, that's a huge deal. It almost feels how most people feel about like your eyes or your spine or like something that is like not okay if this gets messed up. Like that's what it feels like with hands.
Yeah, I remember we got a punching bag at the old house we lived in, and I talked to you about like, what, you know, have you ever thought about getting into fighting or boxing? And you're like, yeah, man, it's the only thing is my hand. Like you've thought about doing judo, right? Or jiu-jitsu.
And boxing too. I've done a little boxing growing up, but I never allowed myself to get fully into it. Just because wrists, elbows, and even, you know, with jiu-jitsu is kind of all your joints, right? All that stuff. It's, I can't imagine how much I would hate myself if a hobby ruined my music career. You know, could you imagine, you know? Or just like if you tripped during tennis and you snapped one of your fingers back, like you would hate a part of yourself and be like, why in the fuck did I have to do this? Like I couldn't have just done something different and protected the thing I care about, you know? Yeah. It's frustrating. It's one of those things that makes me wish I had, I guess, wish that I lived longer, wish that you could do multiple lives, you know, because in another life I would have tried it another way, you know? Yeah. Either taken the risk or said, screw music in this one, we're going another route, we're going athletics, or, you know? Yep.
But yeah, I feel like that's, I don't know. I feel like all those exercise for my knee will help, but I feel like diet too has a lot to do with it too. Yeah. You know, I feel like getting on some type of anti-inflammatory diet would help. Sure. Less carbs, you know.
And so we've talked about this in the other podcast we did for Orlando Drummer, but we just briefly mentioned it here. We probably didn't go all the way into it. But just a couple days ago was the 1 year Carnivore anniversary.
Did we talk about that?
I can't remember.
I don't think we did.
Maybe we did it not recording, actually. Yeah. So it was March 1st of last year, 2020. We both went on carnivore diet, and you did it for a month.
You're on like a year now.
I'm still on it. Yeah, it's been a full year. But I'm curious, like, what did you learn from that, and what did you end up like settling on long term? Because I do remember, sorry, it might be slightly oversharing, but you had a problem with like sweating glands that you found out through that were very tied to sugar. Remember that, right?
I think so.
Or sugar impacted it a ton for some reason.
Well, I sweat ridiculous amounts anyway. I mean,
you do sweat a lot.
yeah. I mean, I've been told, like I was saying at CrossFit, that my personal trainer even told me, like, dude, you sweat more than anybody I've seen here. And he's, I'm sure he's seen hundreds of people. Yeah, I'll like lay down after an exercise and get up, and it's like a sweat angel on the floor. But yeah, I think what I was having problems with was if I went over to students' houses, you know, and they just had it like slightly warm, I'd just start sweating through my clothes. But yeah, I felt like when I was on Carnivore, it kind of definitely decreased that a lot.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. But man, that was a very interesting diet to go on. Just, I remember the craziest thing was the big spurts of energy you get after eating meat.
You get almost high, isn't it? It's so fucking weird. It's like one of the most unbelievable parts of it that you like. I hesitate to tell people because it sounds made up. Yeah. I remember telling Kelly, like, Joe had the same thing, like euphoria after eating steak. Yeah. Like, how little sense does that make? It like some reward system from like a hunter-gatherer type deal, or I mean more the hunter type thing. Very strange. Like you get like you get like a weird, like a physical reaction, noticeable reaction after eating meat. It's very, very strange, man. But so I remember though you didn't have that same like kratom level energy that I had. I was like hyper.
No, well, I think what was different, the main difference between ours was the sleep thing, where you woke up like wired and I woke up very sluggish. But when I came around, I was very balanced the whole day.
Yeah, no ups and downs.
It was this weird sluggishness right when I got up, which was definitely different than I feel like what you said yours was.
Yeah. Mine, that one of the weirdest ones was only 6 hours sleep. I cannot sleep a minute longer. I just pop up after 6 hours, which I should say, the reason I love that so much is because I like to do the math over a month and like, okay, how much like life did I gain from not sleeping, an extra hour and a half every night? And you can do this math over a year. It's like several days in a year that you like add to your...
I'm sure like weeks, man.
Yeah. And you span that over 20 years or something, if you could do it for 20 years. But it's...
That's what I'm curious about with you, is to find out if it's something that you can't, like, how long do you expect to do this for? Is it good for your body to do it long term? Because anything I've heard about carnivore is that it's considered an elimination diet, right? You're just supposed to be on it a short time and then start introducing things.
And the introducing thing is where it gets tough, because I have attempted to eat certain vegetables over the last year, and it's almost the same every time, where it's super bloated, super sluggish, a little bit of back pain comes back. Like, I feel the inflammation come back. Part of it is because you're just not used to eating that thing. It's not that vegetables give you inflammation necessarily, but it is weird how reactive you get. It turns you into like, and I've used this word before, like a dietary pussy. Like, you can't handle anything, I'm like fearful of a lot of foods because it will, I know how I react. If I take a bite of this apple, I will have diarrhea for 3 days. Like, that's what happens when I eat a bite of an apple now. Yeah. It's weird. I tried it. I tried a bite of an apple. That's what happened. It sucks, But I want to get blood work done pretty soon, because it has been a year. I think we've talked about this before, because you have some guitar students whose parents are doctors, right? And it's interesting what they know and what they don't.
Very surprising.
No, it's surprising sometimes.
You really view doctors kind of as this
holy grail of
health.
Yeah.
They shouldn't, like, they know everything about health. And I think I was telling you the other day, it's one of my students' parents that's very prolific doctor, at least it seems like, with the size of the house and the cars in the driveway, the gate you have to drive through and the fountain you have to drive around.
That's a good way to size them up. Yeah.
But yeah, like drinking Diet Coke, and then we get in a conversation about soda, and they're not even sure the name of what the type of fake artificial sweetener that's in it. And I'm like, you mean aspartame?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. They say that's not good for you. They say you are they.
You are the,
you are
you're
who,
the they, dude.
I don't understand. Like, so, but I guess you forget that some of, they're specialists, like a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
I feel like concentrates that one sector. They're probably not taught too much about diet and health, right?
Yeah, and I think people like us who learn about nutrition from mostly podcasting, right, or books, we end up being closer to like a jack of all trades, where we're probably not an expert in any of this stuff. We don't have a medical degree in anything, but you do kind of learn the whole spectrum, like a little bit about neuropsychology, a good amount about diet and fitness and nutrition, and kind of, I think we would be like year 2, like general practitioner med students, right? I mean, that's how I feel sometimes, it's I would imagine both of us have earned our associate's degree metaphorically through, I mean, how many hundreds of hours of podcasts can you listen to before you're you're around that sort of level of knowledge? Yeah. It's interesting though, with this carnivore thing, doing blood work, I'm definitely fearful that if I were to go to the wrong doctor, that I would have really uncomfortable, like uninformed conversations with somebody who knows nothing about this, right? And they would say like, you're an idiot, go eat some bread, because that's what this food pyramid says. And it's like, I don't even want to entertain that conversation,
Isn't there a type of doctor? I forgot what they call them. There's a type of doctor that, like,
some sort of specialist?
No, it's I can't remember what you call it. It's a type of doctor that'll give you like try to figure out, like, instead of giving you medicine, what is the cause of this hurting? And then we'll root back to the...
That should be all of them, is what it should be, right?
There's a name for it, and I can't think of it. But anyway, yeah, I wish, like you were saying, I wish that was all of them, you know?
Yeah. It's frustrating, man. I mean, I remember one time, it's a weird story, but this was several years ago. I went to this doctor to get a prescription refilled of Xanax, and I don't take Xanax often at all. It was just for travel, very low dose, had it for years. You know, it was just never a problematic drug for me at all. I would oftentimes go months and months without even taking it, you know, and just have a very small prescription that was like for when I traveled.
Yeah.
I went to get one refilled, and the doctor I had been going to for years. I mean, I saw this woman like once a year, you know. She wasn't like some close doctor or anything, but she had actually moved out of state. I had no idea. So they hooked me up with this other doctor, and the doctor was like very, what's the word? Like distrusted me from the beginning because I was young and it was Xanax. Something must be wrong here.
Yeah.
And so I tried to tell her, like, listen, the type of anxiety I have is depersonalization and derealization, and I know that because of this. You know, and as I begin to explain what I know about myself, she would cut me off and go, how do you know that? How do you know? Almost like I'm not allowed to know, like I don't have the authority to say any of this stuff. And I'm like, bitch, I read every book that's ever been written on this. I've literally read every single one of them. There's only 5 of them, and I read them all, you know. 100+ hours of podcasts on this specific topic, and I'm not allowed.
Have a degree, dude.
Yeah, it's just it's really, really frustrating sometimes, and it's as I've gotten older, it's made me more hesitant to go to doctors because I've learned how fallible they are. You know.
No, it's weird. I know we've talked about this before, but we kind of both get the same thing with traveling. It's like I don't know. I feel like whenever I get back and I think about my previous travel, it just feels like a dream.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't really there.
Yeah, like you derealize or depersonalize in the anxious state of traveling. As you're traveling, it's like you're not there.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, we're kind of talking about, I don't know, you can edit this out if you want, but I thought this was interesting.
Yeah,
I saw this earlier. You ever remember master classes? You know the masterclass app, right? It's like Hans Zimmer teaches film scoring.
Sure.
So one of the creators of that created this thing called Outlier. Have you seen anything about this?
I know the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
So, well, no, this is this company. It's called Outlier. It's like Masterclass.
Okay.
But it's like different people teach different subjects, kind of like Masterclass, but they're accredited college.
Whoa.
So it's like such and such teaches astrophysics.
Okay.
And then if you watch that and you complete the course and everything, it's like it counts as a college credit.
Interesting.
Which I think would be pretty cool to... do they have that with YouTube? Like YouTube University or something where you can like...
I don't think any of that's accredited, but I know that stuff is discussed a lot about like, should there be some sort of accreditation system in place? Because in theory, you and I very likely have the same amount of knowledge as someone with an associate's degree in like nutrition, for example. I think I do. I really think I do. I mean, how many hundreds of hours can you listen to until you should, you know, have something to say that you learned this stuff, you know?
Yeah. But I think that's interesting because, you know, that's how a lot of people are learning nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, through podcasts and YouTube.
And it's devalued like universities in general. You know, I used to think it was more of like a music industry thing that you don't need to go to school because no one's going to ask for that piece of paper necessarily. And you need the piece of paper for some stuff. Like I'm not interested in going to a doctor or a lawyer who listen to a bunch of podcasts. And, you know, like, of course you have to have standards depending on the field. But I feel like that bubble is expanding of like the fields where it doesn't really matter. You know, nobody's asking for that piece of paper anymore, you know, and so I don't want to say some of the experts, but like some of the most knowledgeable people are just talking on YouTube for free. You know, it's amazing. It's amazing.
You imagine about to go in for open heart surgery. And the guy's like, don't worry, dude. I learned this from Dr. Jane's YouTube channel.
She's the best, dude. She's the best.
Over 1 million subscribers. Don't worry, dude.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, though, because the music industry and the drum industry, like, where I have no doubt that there are certain people who have watched my videos and then they sign up on the site and they learned enough stuff that they can take that and they go out into the world and they make money as a successful, musician, right? But I don't have any accreditation to share with them. I don't have a degree in drums or music performance at all. This is all just sharing of information. It's just transactional stuff. But there's no like markers along the way where they could say, well, hey man, I've been a member of OrlandoDrummer.com for 3 years, and so that's worth something. It never even comes up. It's just a non-issue. But this is all in the arts. Yeah. And people tend to not ever really ask for degrees in the arts.
But I think that's leaking over to business too, man.
Yeah,
you totally. Hear Gary Vee and people talking about that, like, most of them don't hire based on, a piece of paper that you have,
Yeah. Yeah, it's never once come up in the music industry, any part of the music industry, even reaching out into like videography or into mixing and engineering, composition, like when you will never have that conversation of, where did you go to school? It's just, I don't know what those worlds are like, but I've never touched them,
Yeah. And then people who do go to like famous schools like Berkeley are usually the ones to throw that out first, right? Like, hey, what's up? I went to Berkeley College of Music. Like they throw that out as opposed to somebody else asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because the next question is like, okay, dope, but can you play?
But like, what have you done? Can I see what you've done?
Yeah. And if you find out someone can play and they didn't go to Berkeley, it's even more impressive.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
What have you guys been watching lately? We usually kind of update each other on
watching
good
on
things
Netflix.
To watch. That's our escapism.
We watched. You're always one of our. Kelly asks me all the time. She's like, "Joe, say anything?" You've definitely given us some good ones, Netflix shows or whatever. But we're watching. It's called Lupine or Lupine.
Oh yeah.
Did you watch that?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty good.
It was interesting. French show, dubbed over, but they dubbed it well. It's easier to forget.
I'm happy they're starting to bring in a lot of foreign stuff.
Yeah, there's some good ones. I like it a lot. It's I don't like how hard they went in the spy composition direction. Like the spy music wasn't totally necessary in some of the parts. Like it feels very like 96 Mission Impossible vibe sometimes.
Isn't that like a famous it's like a famous like folk tale, like French folk story, right? About
he was inspired by the main character.
He's like it's a true story, right? He's like supposed to be a famous thief or like inspired by.
But like a weird cross of like a mentalist versus a magician versus a con artist, like some weird combination of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of reality to that stuff. I mean, a lot of those like mentalists that had those shows are just like high level social performers that are excellent at getting cues and stuff. And there's some like weird powerful appeal to that. Like if you got good at that, you could like control the world or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah, it's a good show.
What have you been watching?
Man, I've been on a movie kick for a while. Okay. Not really series. It's hard for me to do a series recently. Besides The Servant, M. Night Shyamalan's The Servant, me and my girlfriend watched that every Friday.
Okay.
But I did watch Nomadland last night.
Nomadland.
Have you heard of that?
No.
Well, it won Best Picture at Golden Globes. I'm sure it's going to win the Oscar.
Okay.
Insane. Just deep movie. I didn't really even expect to talk about this today. Okay. But really cool, just kind of view and like the whole story is about this small town that this factory gets shut down and like the whole zip code gets basically like everybody's out of work, and it's just about this lady that lives out of her van and takes up the nomad life and just lives out of her van, and her husband recently died, so it's just her kind of traveling around and doing the nomad thing, living out of her van, and kind of just that whole life.
Yeah.
So it was super powerful. So I'd recommend that one to anybody. So one movie I did actually watch recently, I think you would enjoy a lot. Is this movie called Beautiful Boy?
Beautiful Boy.
It's got Steve Carell in it, which he's been in a lot of dramas recently, so hopefully you wouldn't think it'd be a comedy. Yeah. Just from hearing Steve Carell, but it's about his. So they're like a middle class family, and he has a son. And this is his teenage son who gets addicted to drugs. Just pretty much all of them under the sun. Okay. And just I felt like it was a very realistic portrayal of addiction.
Sure.
And how it affects his family.
And Steve Carell's the dad?
Yeah, Steve Carell's the dad. And like very loving father, middle class white family, you know.
So he's very caught off guard, I take it.
Yeah, and they have a very close relationship too. Him and his son, very close, you know. And his son, it's, you know, he'll go to rehab and get better and then relapse. And this happens 6 or 7 times in the movie. You think, oh man, this is it. He's been out for 2 years. He works at a rehab center. Then all of a sudden, just one day,
boom,
relapses and goes back in. I mean, it has a happy ending where, you know, it's a true story. It's about a true guy. And actually, the guy that it's about actually wrote the book that the movie is about.
Okay.
It's kind of his autobiography, but he's been sober for like 11 years.
Yeah.
So kind of a happy ending. But I know we've talked about just kind of like a lot of movies and shows portray addiction in this weird way.
Yeah.
In a different way, you know. They dramatize it a little bit, you know.
Sometimes they do. And it can be done right, where there's Wolf of Wall Street is always in my top 3 because of how insanely accurate it is. Like, that's a little more of like the Coke world and like the raging
Euphoria, that new episode of Euphoria we talked about, remember?
Yeah, Euphoria is a really good one where, there's a lot of like truths built into the dialogues that they have, the script and the writing and stuff. They hit on some like really, really major like philosophical truths that are discussed in Rehab, but it's hard to make them entertaining, you know? Like there was one line from that dialogue. Euphoria was a very interesting show, but there's that weird random sort of one-off episode they threw out.
Special bonus episode.
Yeah, and it's like a conversation at a diner between a young girl who has an addiction problem and then her like AA sponsor, right? And I remember he had one line in there which said like the plight of all humans, like the struggle of every man is to align yourself with your own values. That seems to be universal. Like the values could change from person to person, but aligning yourself with your own values is like something that we all struggle to do, right? It's like innate, you know, like certain things like that where it's like those are those little truth nuggets that you uncover in a place like Rehab. But man, it's hard to write that into an entertaining modern show because something like Wolf of Wall Street sells way better, right? It's just people getting fucked up. There's a lot heavier stuff under the surface for sure. Yeah,
it's just a kind of cool portrayal of kind of what it did to his family, you know. Because I mean, I have a cousin. You know, I have very, very faint memories when I was young of her, and she got involved, you know, with like meth, you know, then the kind of same thing. She'd relapse. They'd take her into rehab. She'd be good for a year, relapse, and then eventually she got where she just like started hitchhiking around, and then we just haven't seen her again.
Man, dude,
dark.
Meth is a tricky one, right? Because it's highly functional. It's more functional than even Coke or a lot of other stimulants because it's compatible with your work. More than likely, whatever you do, you would do a better job on meth for at least a certain period of time. Eventually, this fucks your life up, but it's like, how come you take tests better on adderall? Because it fucking works. It works really well, and those are quite literally the same drug. You know,
adderall is amphetamine, right?
Yeah, it's an amphetamine. Yep, it's just it's just a dumbed down version of meth. It's not crystal, but it's.
I will forever miss Adderall. That is like my drug of choice that I would.
Adderall. See, Adderall gave me anxiety. Always has. Always. You never had that. Mm-mm. But methalone, which we can talk about a little bit, that never did. Right, which is a weird hybrid drug between methamphetamine and MDMA. Yeah, it is as cool as it sounds. That one never freaked me out, even though it's like, it's very methy. I mean, it is as speedy as it gets, right? But an Adderall pill, they always freaked me out. But most people aren't like that. I mean, I remember, this was years and years ago.
And what you call the methalone, you'd call that Molly, right?
Well, Molly's a slang word. When people say Molly, they normally mean like an E-pill. And
they just mix in whatever.
Yes.
And with E.
Exactly. It's just got all sorts of stuff plus MDMA. But people don't realize MDMA is actually very sleepy. And sleepy might be the wrong word, but it's a sluggish, heavy, not super energetic kind of drug. So when you think about doing MDMA at like a rave type of setting, which I hate, that was never what our group did. We were never like ravers. Those pills very oftentimes will have some sort of amphetamine in them because it really helps the experience. It gives you energy. Because MDMA, you can almost fall asleep on like a really heavy roll sometimes. Not as enjoyable as you might think. But methalone, which, I have a lot of experience. I'm planning on doing a podcast about methalone. Definitely, I'd put that as my top favorite like drug, but it's very speedy.
Let me preface this too by saying this was a while ago.
Yes, we're talking 10 years.
This is like, when somebody asks kind of like, you experimented back in your day, right? This is my back in the day.
Sure,
experimenting, but we didn't know we were taking that then.
We didn't know much about it. Yeah.
We thought we were taking Molly.
Molly, that was the slang word. We didn't really define it. And yeah, the first time that I ever took it, I'm sure you too, that was the most descriptive anybody got, is Molly.
Yeah.
And that's
what I thought I was taking the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, if somebody had said you're taking methalone, I would have been like, shit.
Well, if they had explained this is a hybrid between an amphetamine and
But this is
MDMA.
why this is, why, like...
That's why drug experience is important.
Yeah.
You learn to ask the right questions.
Experience and, exactly. Just know what you're taking,
Yeah.
But first time I took it, I didn't feel anything. Second time I took it, didn't feel anything.
You've had that with a lot of drugs, right? I feel like kratom.
Well, my tolerance is very high on anything.
Yeah, you always had to take much more. Remember on kratom, like just a weird example, which I took for back pain years ago. I don't take kratom anymore, but I did for a stretch there. I would tell you, like, listen, man, if I take more than 2 or 3 grams, I'm like hugging the toilet. Like, you gotta be careful. And you had to take like 7 or 8 grams before you're like, I kind of feel it's like coffee, right?
But man, I remember when I had 2 years ago. Do you remember when I had that root canal?
Yeah.
But like, dude, it started hurting at around like 7 o'clock at night, and I couldn't get into the dentist till the next day, and I was just in
agony.
And I was like, I called you like, do you have anything? You're like, dude, all I have is kratom.
Kratom, dude. Yep.
You brought that shit over though, and like, I would wake up in the middle of the night in pain, walk over to my kitchen, and like just grab a whole like, a whole pouch of it and just shove it on my gum,
just dipping it,
and then the pain would go away, and I'd go back to sleep for 20 minutes and wake up.
Yeah.
Pain. But yeah, I remember, because there's different types of kratom, right? It's like some will get you sleepy, some will
more energetic. Some are a lot like Adderall, like white veins. Yeah, they're it'll give you anxiety. Very speedy and crazy.
But I feel like my tolerance. So the first 2 times I took it, it didn't feel anything. But I remember the third time was at that party you were talking about earlier at.
Yeah. What
was it? Paul's birthday?
I think it was Paul's birthday party. So that was the first time you ever like cracked through.
Well, because you were like, you haven't been feeling it, man. Just take 2.
Double up, yeah.
And I remember
because I don't remember you ever snorting it. You never did that.
No way, dude. No.
Gotcha. No. Gotcha. That was my preference. It's a different high. It's very different,
But I remember coming up to you when it hit and just grabbing you by the shoulder.
Hey, dude.
Just doing this little shake of my head, like, okay. But the funniest story about that whole night was that, like, you have to have a mission on it,
Yes.
And there was like 50 people there. And I remember taking a picture of me, you, and Joe, other Joe.
Other Joe, yeah.
And I walked around to everybody in that party and was like asking them for a hashtag.
On the
photo. What would you hashtag on this photo?
Yeah.
Go ahead and type it in. And then I had everybody in that damn party type in a hashtag, and it was the dumbest stuff too.
It was a stupid mission,
dude. And when I got done, I made it like a big deal to everybody. Send in it. Go like this photo. I'm submitting it. Right when I hit to post it, it said like too many hashtags must delete. No, I was like I was so pissed.
It does put you on a mission. Like you get obsessed with something, which is definitely like the methy quality.
But I knew everybody at that party. Everybody knew who I was. I had an icebreaker with everybody.
Yeah. The social confidence part is one of the most peculiar. It will turn everybody into a genuine extrovert. You are like charged
100%.
Up to talk to people. It's so crazy. And it's also weird because you don't appear like you're on drugs to other people. It's not like you're derping.
You're just
so
a really
hard.
confident guy.
You're just a super confident dude. It's weird. And Kelly knows some of these stories, but like there were, I was definitely single for the first big chunk that our group was sort of doing this. Methalone, we were going downtown and going to bars. Still didn't drink, back then at all. But like talking to girls was weirdly easy. So easy. It's like everything you say lands. You're not awkward. There's no awkwardness. And even stuff that you don't think would work, it does work.
Yeah. You can say
weird.
It with 100% confidence.
And that shines through.
Yeah, anything. Yeah, anything you say is going to be.
Remember we had that game, or I think Paul might have made it up, where you would take your phone and open the like to the screen where you just dial a number. And you would just hand it to a girl and be like, put your number in here. Which in theory should work like 1 out of 10 times. Like you haven't even introduced yourself. Like this is dumb. But you're just like exuding this level of confidence where it actually worked. It was very,
but
very
you remember
strange.
where it got to where it was like, let's do it to like, and see what the least amount of work we can do to get the number. So it was like, you could not just not even saying, just hand them the phone. You put your number on my phone.
What if we just don't talk and just hand your phone?
Or just like say a few words and just, you want me to put my number in your phone? And just be like, yeah.
Isn't that weird, man? Oh, it's strange.
Yeah.
I have a buddy. I don't want to, I don't know if I want to say his name necessarily. I'll leave it out just to be respectful. But he didn't do it very often. He lives in Georgia. And he came down one random weekend just to hang out. And we were doing that. And you weren't there. It was really just me, him, and one other person, I think. And he did it right before he went to go get on the flight, flight home. And he got bumped up to first class, like randomly. And there's like 4 or 5 people in first class. And he has no experience with this drug, but he just knows that he's like very extroverted, very confident. And somehow everything you say like is believable to people, right?
Yeah.
And I know this person well enough to know that he would not fabricate this story at all. He just wouldn't give a shit enough to even do that. But he became like the life of the party in first class, where like he created like a fucking social circle in this plane, and he's sitting around telling jokes and having drinks with strangers, and everyone's crowding around certain seats and telling stories, and it all revolved around him and this weird confidence that he had. And then when he got off the plane, he wasn't really rolling by the time he landed. We say rolling, but it's not really rolling. It's very unique. And he called me and was like, dude, I don't know what just happened. He's like, that was the weirdest plane ride of my life. He's like, I made so many friends and told my life story to a bunch of people. Like people were crying and laughing, and like it's really weird, man. The nights like take these shapes that they never would take otherwise.
Anytime I ever took that with anybody, I met like a lifelong friend.
Yeah. Do you remember Peer Review Sunday?
No.
You might.
I do remember this. Okay.
Yeah, it might have been just the roommate
Peer
thing.
Peer Review Sunday,
where we would on Sundays the plan. This only happened a few times, but the idea was just fucking gold. Where we would sit around, and if you were on methalone, you could. We didn't call it methalone at the time. We called it derp, was what we called it. A lot because it would just make you derp. But
how long would you say this period of time was?
It depends of like for me personally, early 2013, like January 2013 until like the middle of 2014. Okay. Year and a half. Yeah. Right around there. And
it wasn't like an everyday thing.
Well, depends on who in the group you were talking about. You certainly did it far, far less than like the core group.
And I remember for me, it was definitely like a 3 or 4 month thing. It wasn't
a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Well, because it got. Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said that there weren't like dark times, because we had one friend in particular who I won't say his name, but he really fucked himself up on it. People had different reactions to it, and like some people would get quiet on it and some people would get talkative. Like the random people that would like behave totally different, personality changes sometimes. Like and some people handled it better than others. But yeah, there was definitely some dark times in that whole period where we would all collectively kind of be like, "Ooh, that got weird." Like we're doing, what I mean? It's not all fun and games sometimes. But you also were somewhat removed from that group because there was a core group of us that lived, we're all roommates at that one house, and so we definitely did it more than more than other people.
But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you about Peer Review Sunday.
Peer Review Sunday. Yeah. Well, it was just, we would all take, the plan was, again, it only happened a couple times, but we would take it and then we would sit around and like review each other, like in the context of that week. So like, hey man, you did the dishes on Sunday and I wanted you to know that I really appreciate when you did the dishes, bro, because you didn't have to do that. Like some of those were my dishes, bro, and I understand. So I just want you to know. And then like if there was something they could improve upon, it's just, it like opens up.
It's such a healthy thing to do though.
That's the thing. It's a really healthy thing to do. And it makes you can't get your feelings hurt on this drug at all. So you're super receptive, super open. And you're also you're like weirdly capable of giving people the benefit of the doubt. So if somebody says like, hey man, I'm mad that you did this thing, all of your defensive reactions don't come out. It's more like, oh my gosh, dude, I'm so sorry. I don't want you to feel that way. What can I do? Like, and you fucking mean it. Like you mean it in a weird way. And so we did have some, but it's also, this gets a little, I've teared up telling this part before. I have had conversations with friends in the backyard of that house where we would say things to each other that we genuinely meant in terms of like how we feel about each other as friends, how we value each other, you know, what you love about this person, things that you probably wouldn't say sober. Yeah. You know, and it's not a lie. It's almost like more true in a weird way. That drug
just makes you more vulnerable.
Way more vulnerable, for sure.
And okay to share things like that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, you let your guard down, man. And it's all kind of in line with like what MDMA was invented for, which is a fascinating premise. But, you know, soldiers would come back from wars shell-shocked before we fully understood PTSD. And it was sort of this psychological anomaly that you could have someone that was so traumatized by a single occurrence, one single event, like they watched their friend die, right? And that it was so traumatizing that it impacted every single day after that they like couldn't shake the trauma from this singular event that happened. And so they had this idea, well, what happens if we could do the opposite? Is it possible that you could have a singular event that is so overwhelmingly positive that it has the same positive residual effect moving forward? And MDMA was sort of introduced to the psychology world, or rather discovered and researched on that premise. So the idea was that you would do counseling sessions. And I definitely believe that like certain experiences that I had with MDMA and also specifically with methalone in that weird window of time, they did have like lasting residual positive impacts, you know?
I would 100% say that for sure. And it's interesting too, the perspective shift that you get, that you can have from certain things like that can carry over from, like, you know, thinking when you're sober, like, I don't know, just carrying over some of those things that you learned. Like, you're obviously not going to be able to act exactly like you were on.
But you remember that person you were.
Yeah. It's all the perspective shifts that I love about any drug, I feel like, that you can pull from when you know. Because I don't think I've ever, I think the only, I guess if you consider marijuana a drug, that's really the only one that I've ever consistently taken, you know, or used. But all these other ones, you know, you can like experiment with and pull a lot of positive things from them, I feel like, you know?
Yeah. I would love for you to do like a hard psychedelic trip at some point.
That's one thing I've never done psychedelics.
They're totally different.
I don't think I'm a controlling person at all, but I feel like that lack of control scares me a lot. I guess that's a very contradictory statement I just said, right? Not a controlling person at all, but the lack of control scares me. I don't know.
It's an extreme lack of control. It's a new level of no control, that's for sure. It's also like there's an element of skill where like I don't know, something about like a lot of drugs, you're still here. You know, like Coke is one, alcohol is one, MDMA is kind of one, where like you're still you and your identity is not... Right, you still have this baseline consciousness at some core level. You know your name is Joe, you feel like you, and it's just kind of this malleable top end of it gets shifted around a little, and that's what you enjoy. But psychedelics, like, oh man, it's deeply threatening to like your sense of identity, right? Like it threatens like your own baseline of consciousness in a weird way. My favorite phrase, borrow this from Sam Harris, it fucking unmakes you. It goes to whatever makes you you, and it undoes it, right? So there's a different level of fear sometimes with it.
But I mean, I think I really feel like that's something new that I'm starting to see that I personally need to work on is letting go of certain things, you know. And so I do agree. I think it would be good for me to try to go, you know, take a couple of days off and just go on a trip.
Yeah, it's maybe we'll do it at some point. I don't like doing them casually. I'm with you on taking a couple days off, dedicating the time to it, treating it with a certain level of
respect.
Yeah, a respect and a seriousness. Yeah. Have you ever heard that Terrence McKenna approach to pot? In that when you smoke pot casually or daily, just a little bit, get a little high here, a little hit there, you know, whatever. That's the wrong way to use it. That basically super high dose edibles are like how we're supposed to do that.
Really?
Yeah. Where it's like, I mean, think about eating like a huge dose of edibles and how similar that is to like a psychedelic experience, right? I mean, it's not like taking a little toke off of a bowl or a joint. I mean, it's not like that at all. It's a drug experience eating a huge amount of edibles. But yes, I forget where he's written about this, but basically that's what our relationship to pot is supposed to be, like intense psychedelic experiences that are not daily, sort of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, I've never had any intense psychedelic experience from weed.
Have you ever had too many edibles?
Like I've never had a good experience from edibles where I like really like felt.
Huh.
I mean, I feel like I've eaten a lot of edibles before too, but never really had this insane over experience. But like I was saying, you know, my tolerance for things are pretty high.
Yeah.
And equally my tolerance for things are high. Equally my nervousness to try new things is very low. So whenever I try new things like edibles or anything like that, I'll end up eating the lower side of what I probably should.
Oh, I see.
When my tolerance is probably really high. So I feel like it would take me multiple times to build up to the level that I.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, and I feel like with marijuana, it's like, or with weed, just in general, it's I don't know. It's like I'm smoking to get high then. And I feel like edibles, you have to eat, and then it kicks in like an hour, and then you're signing up for the next 8 or 12 hours of your life to kind of be.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's not experiential as though like the act of smoking the bowl is the thing that we're doing. Yeah, you take it, and then you got to hang out and wait for the experience to come. Yeah, it's different too. Yeah. It's a different high. It's not at all like smoking weed.
For me, it's just, you know, I'm smoking to go to bed, or, you know, if I'm working on music in the studio or anything like that, you know.
We've talked about this too as we've gotten older. You end up using it more tactically and not so much just as like starting the day, smoke a bowl, why not? Like you know what I mean? As you get older, you think about that more, but like, why would I do that right now? Like,
yeah, and I personally just couldn't, I guess, I don't know. I don't like just the thought of, I don't know, I probably couldn't go teach after smoking.
Yeah.
You know, like,
I never liked teaching and smoking.
I don't know. It just makes me feel a little like probably not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
A little wrong, you know.
Anything that involves talking, you know, for some reason, I feel like it doesn't really help me. It might give me more creative thoughts, but I'm not as good at saying them.
Yeah. Right?
Like it slows down my delivery of them. My vocabulary shrinks a little bit, even though the thought might be more profound.
Yeah.
You know, I could never smoke before like recording talking stuff ever. Never smoked before this podcast or almost any playing drums and playing music would be different.
Different.
Yeah, we've definitely smoked before shows way back in the day. That no problem.
Speaking of back in the day, it's a great story. And going back to methalone, do you remember when we both Popped one.
Walking on stage to start the show. And we
we guessed, like, what song you think it's going to hit.
We said Wildfire, and we were right.
Yeah, we both looked at each other during the song we were playing.
We were like,
We were like, oh, yeah.
Yep. Because it takes 20, 30 minutes or something to hit.
You remember after the show when we were packing up, the band members, they were like, guys, we got to pack up because we were just sitting there talking the whole time about the show. Like, dude, that was so awesome. And you should flash the picture of us with the robot.
The picture on.
We were like so happy to find those robots.
It was some event. Well, I don't know what the event was. It was like a fundraiser thing at UCF type of thing. Yeah, it was our college campus. And there was some robot costume dude. And there was a giant line of children. And we were just, one of us said, I think you said, you were like, hey, you want to go see that robot? Take a picture with the robot? And I was like, yes, I want to go see the robot. Like... And we just fucking ran over, cut in line of all these people, didn't even like acknowledge that there was a line.
And we were so confident too. The people in line were like, no, man, it's
okay. Go ahead, you got it, sure.
You guys look really excited to see these guys.
More excited than my kid. And we just threw our arms around this robot like, yeah! Got our robot picture.
We look so happy in that picture too,
Oh
dude.
my God. That was so fun. Though, you know, it's funny. I remember that night was one of those, it was a weird... One of the first times I experienced this, it can happen with MDMA too, where you have that rush of like all the euphoria vanishes instantly, right? Where you go from like this weird flow state into like the energy gets sucked out of the room all of a sudden, and you're just instantly sober and like, what am I doing here? And why was all this funny? It's very weird, like that switch that goes off sometimes.
For me, it's that... as soon as I start thinking too much, I'm in that flow and I'm like just thinking about what's next and what's going on and what's happening. And then all of a sudden you think like, I'm having so much fun. This is going to end soon. You start thinking like this might end soon. I'm going to have to go back to normal. And then you're like,
yep, it
you're
sucks
back in
you
reality.
back in.
You know?
It's very, very weird how that works. And what's weird though, I didn't do it that night, but somebody told me, like, listen, dude, if you just take more, that goes away. And I was like, no, like, I don't feel comfortable right now. Why would I take more?
Might not be the best advice.
Yeah, but it
works.
It
right?
does work.
I'm sure
it does work. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a fascinating drug, man. Yeah, I'd love to do a full podcast on that, just to hash out some of these stories and different things. And, you know.
But I will make the warning, though, that I'm 100% glad that we quit finding it, because there was a point where we just stopped being able to get it for a while.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, you love it a lot, and I'm very glad that we just couldn't find it anymore.
It was fortunate that life was just like, nope, you're done.
You're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Because had we had complete access to that for, you know, the foreseeable future, you know, I don't know. Like, I have confidence in myself that I would have had control.
Sure, same.
You
It's
know?
not like we messed our lives up in any way.
Yeah,
in that
and
phase.
and it was more or less so once a month, you know, every now and again thing for me.
Sure.
It wasn't, you know, but I did. I will always say that's like, if you imagine you've worked for something your whole life, you know, you've like worked your ass off for something your whole life. Let's for the sake of argument say, you know, music was your passion. You work trying to be in a band your whole life, 10 years, and then all of a sudden you walk out on a stage in front of 10,000 people and you get to play your song in front of people. That feeling that you feel, that is what I would feel on that drug, you know? And it was the most amazing feeling I've ever had.
Yeah.
And
it holds up to almost nothing else. I mean, yeah.
So, you know, I feel like loving something that much probably isn't a good thing.
Yeah, it is a manipulation of your psychology. You're only supposed to feel that way a few times in life.
And it should be earned.
Yes, and you don't earn it. You just take a pill.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, in hindsight, it probably is, or rather, it was for the best that just disappeared completely. There was that whole, well, I won't go fully into that story, but there was a reason why it disappeared, having to do with the person who kind of got in trouble, and then the connection got messed up, but it ended, honestly, the friends group kind of broke up. That's what happened. There was some drama too tied in there where like people moved out and other people weren't friends, and like that whole core sort of just evaporated. And in hindsight, it's like, yeah, man, that was long enough. It was long enough of a window. It's funny, man. Are there any drugs that you would love to try that you've just never had access to, or never seen or known anyone that had it?
I mean, we're talking about psychedelics.
Psychedelics, yeah.
I, would eventually like to, take the hurdle and, go on like a mushroom trip. I don't know if I could ever take acid or...
a little longer.
I mean, I don't know. I doubt I could... Ayahuasca would be interesting.
Ayahuasca,
just because it's natural, it's grown. I feel like any... Would you say DMT is...
DMT is the main ingredient in ayahuasca.
Okay, that's the main ingredient.
It's just
so
edible.
It's natural?
It is natural. Well, DMT is in everything. It's like carbon.
Right.
Yeah. But it's also weird because ayahuasca is the edible version of it, so it's a lot slower. Where when you think DMT smoking it is...
It only lasts a few minutes, right?
It's a few minutes, but it's very like it's 0 to 100, where ayahuasca is like the slow creep up. It's a much longer experience. Equally as intense, but not as short. So it's very drawn out. A lot of people like the slow incline as opposed to just like blasting off into the other side of the universe.
You haven't done DMT, right?
I've done DMT pen before. I've never cracked through on DMT, which for those listening that don't know, like full ego death off of DMT. I've gotten a lot further into that fucking realm through other psychedelics than DMT. But the last time I did DMT, I hit a pen, and I had that doomy glow where like you're kind of half in, half out, and I felt like almost a warning about like I wasn't respecting this enough, and it made me just want to be like, okay, not today, that's okay, It felt like a spiritual warning of like, hey bitch, do you know where you are? It was like, no, I don't, and I'm gonna step out now. Thanks for your time, It scared me. It was very doomy.
You hear about a lot of people having the same experience on that. Going out of body and like shooting off into the universe and meeting like
Well, there's people all over the world for, in theory, like hundreds of years. I mean, shit, Moses and the acacia bush, I mean, it depends on how back you want to go, but like there are weird similarities in that experience that a lot of people have a hard time quantifying. Like you meet the same entities is what you would call them, like the little green aliens, and then also the clockwork sort of theology that goes around it. So like there's a certain realm that you can get to where there are like ding dongs of like a grandfather clock and like ticking, right? And there's certain colors and things that go along with that where people describe it as though they've all been to the same place that sounds like you're inside of a clock, and there's certain like humming and buzzes and this like collection of noises that everyone describes the same way. And so if you think that your consciousness is traveling somewhere, it would be like under this theory that you're traveling to a place that does exist because you can hit it from different people can hit it from different parts of the world and come back with the same story. Of course, you could also say that it's just some manipulation of your neurology. We all have the similar neurology, so
isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it like a chemical, like right before you're gonna die, that it gets released into your?
Yeah. So you have the pineal gland.
That's what gives you that like going to the light at the end of the tunnel feeling, or
Sure.
It makes you okay with.
Kind of, sort of. So it's like you have a pineal gland in your brain, which is it releases DMT, but it only seems to do it during birth and during death. So the theory would be that DMT is like the lubricant that escorts you from wherever we came from to wherever we go.
That's deep. Like that's
it's like
some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and it's like there's also I've heard some fascinating theories. Kelly and I talk about this with kid stuff sometimes, that like babies, part of the magic of them is that they're fucking soaked in it. And they are chemically, it is true that they have very high levels of DMT, and we don't know why or what it's supposed to have been doing, like why the pineal gland releases it all at the time of birth or at the time of death. But it's something along the lines of like a dimensional lubricant, right? That it brings you from wherever we came from to wherever we're going. And yeah, man, I don't know. I don't have any definitive thoughts on any of this stuff. It's more just in the domain of like fun shit to talk about that we have no fucking clue. But yeah, man, it's wild shit. DMT though, it scares me because I value stability, and I know fully how much that can rock your psyche. And like, I'm interested in growth and learning, but man, sometimes the thought of having a certain type of trip and what it would do to my psyche, I'm like, dude, I don't have time for that. I got shit to do in my life. You know?
Like the first episode of this podcast, that whole mushroom trip, like I'm sure you don't want to have one of those maybe once every year or two, right?
Only every 1 or 2 years, yeah.
Like,
it's
I
too
don't know
much.
if you could take completely restructuring the way you almost view huge issues in your life once a month, you know?
Yeah.
That would be too much.
Too much. And too painful. Painful. You know, it's, it hurts. So, I mean, growth always hurts. But sometimes it hurts so much that it's just like, oh, I need some time, dude. I need some time. You know, also part of psychedelic experiences is unpacking, right? So you do need months after an experience to understand what it was, to think about it, retell the story, kind of work through some of the analogies and stuff that popped up. You know, they're unique in that way. They come with like stories sometimes, and you don't fully understand what it meant when you had this vision of this thing. Right. You come back confused. Like, what in the fuck? It's like a dream. Like, I don't know what any of this means. And you have to discuss it and think about it.
Isn't that like a theory that like that's where like cavemen came upon like mushrooms, and that's how consciousness, like not cavemen, but like
stoned ape theory.
They came upon mushrooms and ate mushrooms, and for an extended period of time, that's what gave them.
Sure. Well, it does enhance creativity. Okay, so one weird thing that it definitely does do is mushrooms allow certain sectors of your brain to interact with each other on a neurological level that they otherwise do not. So like if you had this like wiring diagram of your mind where like this part of the brain kind of sort of communicates with here, that diagram gets like scrambled, and certain parts of the brain are talking to parts of the brain that they're not supposed to communicate with necessarily. So it complicates your neural pathways in a way that we don't understand. And so the thought would be something along the lines of like, if monkeys found mushrooms, it would definitely like scramble their brain, for a lack of better words, and make it operate differently. And it increases visual acuity. It increases creativity. It does a lot of things that would bring, totally in theory, an ape from an ape-like state to more of a human-like state. And it is just a theory. I don't know that you'll ever be able to...
Yeah, you never. But I think it's interesting theory.
Very interesting, yeah.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. I don't know, when we go like giant brain philosophy, why we're here, what are we, any of those unanswerable questions. I don't know where psychedelics fit in to that or how, but I'm convinced that they're involved. They're not like apathetic to it, or rather we shouldn't be apathetic to the idea that psychedelics have something to say about all of that. It's very tough to say exactly how they're involved and what role they play, but they absolutely have a part of the puzzle. One of the puzzle pieces is something to do with psychedelics and what they do to our mind. And I don't know if that ties into like evolutionary stuff like we're talking about, or if it is, I'm gonna steal a Jordan Peterson word, if psychedelics help us to understand the metaphorical substrate that is all of religion, right? That there's like, that we desperately need story and mythology and drama and literature and art to attempt to paint a picture of what this world is and what morality is, what meaning is, the origins of humanity, that some of those categories that science really can't speak to, that we do need story and mythology, drama, literature, art, that we need all of that because this metaphorical substrate is the best thing we could come up with to try and understand what all of this is. And psychedelics seem to be a source of many of those stories, right? Like they tell the stories to us in a weird way because we can't understand it any other way. You need a story, you know?
I think that's cool. Speaking of Peterson, have you read his new book?
I ordered it.
Yeah.
The Beyond Order.
Yeah. The 12 more rules to
12
life.
more.
Thanks, Peterson. Still wrapping my head around the first 12. Damn it.
Yeah. How did you get sucked into the wormhole that is him and all of his writings and teachings and stuff?
Ah, man. Good question. I want to say like Audible recommended it as the 12, his first book.
Okay.
Just because I have a bunch of other books similar to it.
Sure.
But also my uncle was a big fan of him too.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, and I'm sure little YouTube videos popped up and it just kind of clicked. Oh, this is the same guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting guy. Love a lot of his views.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting he's like the defender of religion while simultaneously being
I know,
not religious
odd.
at all in
really
a way.
Odd, yeah. Like I remember like thinking that that this he probably I wouldn't say is against religion, but
not a fundamentalist Christian.
Yeah,
right?
And then he came out with a whole podcast series about Bible stories where he just goes over Bible stories.
Yeah.
It's super interesting though.
Yeah, it's I also love listening to those who completely oppose him. Sam Harris being like one of the more famous, secular atheist people, who is very much like someone who attacks religion and has probably written some of the most credible and well thought out arguments against religion. Right? That would be Sam Harris. The Moral Landscape, his book, is one of the most cohesive arguments for why secular reasoning, is the way to go. But man, some of the debates that they've had and conversations that they've had, it is fascinating because picking a team is extremely difficult. You're really relying on the opinions of two people that are way more brilliant than you, and you can't actually fill in for either one of them. If I had to sit across from Sam Harris, I'm gonna get fucked up is what's gonna happen. I cannot argue with that guy.
Yeah.
Your upper PhD level psychology and philosophy. And same with Jordan Peterson. If I had to sit in Sam Harris's position and argue for secular reasoning against Jordan Peterson, I lose that.
Does that not kind of
debate.
fuck you up though? Like to think about like if you sat in front of one guy, he could probably make you believe one way. And then if you sat in front of another guy, he could probably make you believe.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around that just because,
you could be convinced either way depending on who you're talking to. Yeah, it's very, very... Yeah, you're right. Wrapping your head around that is tough. I think for me, I do enjoy this hybridized position that weirdly Ben Shapiro has. Ben Shapiro's relatively extreme in a lot of his political views, certainly. Very, very far conservative. And he's Jewish, an Orthodox Jew. So that comes with a whole bunch of oddities, to say the least. But, he has this view of like a hybridized approach where ultimately much how Republicans and Democrats are supposed to get married, and it is the push and the pull of chaos and order that is where the balance is found. That something along the lines of like science and religion are supposed to get married, and there is supposed to be a push and a pull of, but
that's where I've come, I feel like, to settle on is that I'm supposed to have that push and that pull. Like,
yes,
there are some people who spend their whole life in the push or in the pull,
Correct.
and it's hard for them to even accept that there is another side, or that they're so I don't want to say, and this is probably a bad word to use, brainwashed, but I mean, you grow up.
They're so fundamentalist. This is the truth, period.
This is the truth no matter what.
Yeah.
Never try to even examine the other side to it.
Yeah.
And then, but I feel like that's extremely healthy for everybody, to just examine both sides. And then what you feel is right, question that,
Yeah.
Just try to put yourself in the other side and, view what they might think is right and put yourself in their shoes, view both the push and the pull and kind of come to a happy medium and sometimes you might be in the full, you
might just
on
confirm
one side.
Yeah. Confirm that what you thought was right the whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happens.
Yeah.
I like the thought that like your opinion is only valid if you have explored the counter arguments. If you haven't, then you really don't, it's almost like you don't have a right to have the opinion just yet. Like opinions are, or rather maybe belief is a better word. Like you have to earn your beliefs. And it's really painful sometimes because you might find out that your innate or your natural belief is just bullshit, or it wasn't even yours. It was handed to you by a book that you read, or by parents, the TV, or your parents,
or the community you grew up in.
Yep.
We both grew up in a small town.
Yeah. Small town.
It's weird. I think I get a lot of this way, I think, from, I grew up in a small town, Alabama.
Yeah.
Mississippi for the first 10 years, Alabama for the next 8. Small town life. I'm sure you can guess what small town Alabama is all about,
Oh, yeah. Christian subculture, very strong.
Very red.
Very red. Yep.
Not trying to get into anything political or anything,
Sure.
but that is small town Alabama, you know? And it's, if you think any other way, you're not, I wouldn't say you're ostracized, but you're
an odd duck.
Exactly, but then going from that to a liberal arts college in Orlando, Florida for 2 years, and then, living here ever since, I get the complete other end of the spectrum.
Sure. City life and city thinking.
Yeah. And it really kind of opens your eyes to, like, I know we talked about this, and like I said, not to get political, but it does kind of tie into what we're talking about, is that how I feel like the electoral college is extremely fair instead of doing the popular vote. Because you grow up, certain areas of the country, you grow up believing certain things because your friends and your family believe that, and you're surrounded by people you believe, and that is that is right to you because everyone around you tells you it's right, and that is just what you believe, you know? And so, for me to go from that to
a liberal arts college
other end of the
city,
spectrum, it kind of opened my eyes to that, like, whoa, there's a whole other side of the spectrum here, and there's a whole other group of people who, believe completely opposite from what I came from, and believe just as heavy and convincing as the other side.
Yeah.
Which one? So you kind of have to pick and choose, and I feel like the last half of my 20s and 30s is kind of me starting to question everything and just dive into every side I can.
Sure.
And I feel like it sucks nowadays because people are getting canceled. People are getting burned at the stake for just questioning certain things.
Sure. For wanting to explore ideas and
just explore them and just talk about them.
Of course. And, this gets right into like the freedom of speech sort of thing. Amazon just this week has banned numerous books, which is weirdly Orwellian.
Dr. Seuss, right?
Dr. Seuss. But not just them. I mean, there's other people. And it's interesting because if there was, let's go to an extreme example, like a white supremacist, right? Like someone who has dog shit values, corrupt philosophy, incorrect thinking across the board. We would both agree that is wrong. If something's fucked up in here. But you have an argument for why you think that's the way to live. I want to read that book. Like, I want to understand where you're coming from, if not for any other reason that it's going to give me an insight that allows me to more quickly debunk your dumbass idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, or just to understand what happened to this person that led them to believe these crazy things. But you have to have an open marketplace of ideas for that to be the case. You have to be able to speak freely.
I think it's the reason why anybody would read Mein Kampf, Hitler's book,
right? Of course.
Just to figure out, like, what fucked you up that much.
What happened here?
Oh, my God.
Exactly. Yeah, the silencing of ideas is a very, very scary premise. Again, very Orwellian too. That information should not be allowed to be exchanged for some reason. It's very weird. And I mean, all these big tech companies are guilty of this in some capacity. It's very, very troubling to say the least. And we might not want to go all the way down that wormhole necessarily because, thanks YouTube for hosting this fucking video. But, love-hate relationship. A lot of people, I'm sure, can empathize with that, man. It's scary. But you know what? I've enjoyed doing this a lot. I feel like you've gone down a lot of these wormholes too. When you circle around politics, it's very, very easy to get into the weeds because if a big story comes out, something to do with Trump or COVID stuff or some current event, it's really easy to discuss things with that context. And those situations are nuanced. And like I said, you can get in the weeds on those. But it is really helpful sometimes to zoom out to political philosophy as like, well, what makes somebody conservative generally or a progressive generally? And I think one of my favorite definitions that helped me understand this spectrum here is that there are times where it is appropriate to be progressive universally so, because progress just implies that there would be some sort of change to your society. And so if we looked around and we saw all sorts of unbelievable things happening in our country and said, we don't like this, we need to change. Well, it's just time to be progressive. I would hope you and I would be progressive at certain points of time in history. Yeah. But then there are other times when progress can either be rooted in, this word's a little tricky, but like misinformation, like it's misinformed, or you're trying to progress too quickly in a direction that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not rooted in healthy philosophy or appropriately discerned data, right? Like progress, you can't just progress into infinity. And so there are times when you say, hey, what we have going on right now is actually pretty goddamn awesome. It's time to be conservative. So for example, if adoption is going very, very well, and then somebody says, hey, I think we should just ditch all the adoption standards and just start giving out kids to whoever wants them. Like, well, okay. Time to be conservative here and say, wait a minute, what we have going on were these standards, maybe we should keep it that way, right, and not progress any further. Maybe we nailed something here. And in that case, I hope that you and I would both be very conservative, So it's relative to like how you see your country, how you see your city, your environment. And I like that thought that you could align yourself in either direction. Depends on what you see,
Yeah. I think it's just this whole past year has been, I feel like it's just kind of got
rough.
Way too
water.
Crazy. Yeah.
Choppy water. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't it like a year, 2 days ago, it was the year anniversary, that first Florida COVID patients. First anniversary of them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I remember thinking like, it'll be back to normal this summer.
Yeah. Well, we heard 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? That was initial. And
flatten the curve.
Plus a year later, we're talking about 2022 still wearing masks. Yeah. It has not been what anyone thought it would be necessarily.
I don't think it's affected your life too much, right? Being online.
Yeah, very lucky in that online stuff. My work days are very similar, and I'm so introverted and not that social that yeah, it didn't change my social life very much necessarily. All my friends that would come over, like you or similar people that I know, we would still hang out just fine. So no, it's interesting talking with people with different jobs though, because God, it's so easy to find people that are just completely fucked by this, and it makes you grateful. I'm sure you feel that way too, right? Just the ability to not have your income stripped away completely.
Yeah. I almost did better this year, honestly.
Yeah.
Because students were at home more and didn't have any music classes, so parents wanted to put them in private virtual lessons because they weren't getting banned every day in school, things like that. So I ended up making more. But yeah, man, it's sad. A lot of small businesses are just done. My uncle, he owns T-Bone Records in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. They're they're a huge independent record store. Like Park Ave CDs here knew them. Like they're widely known through the Southeast.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a little cafe in there. It's like a record store. It's very chill. Really cool spot in Hattiesburg if anybody's ever there. They said they had to get pretty much everything the government offered them to stay afloat.
Wow.
All the, what do they call them? The PP, paycheck. What was it? It was something where you
PPE?
I think so, or something like that, where they pay for the payroll for your employees or something.
Gotcha.
Or I don't know, just different small business loans that they had to get to
stay afloat. Yeah, man, it's you can just think of certain industries. Imagine if you and I had just for some reason opened a bar or a gym or I don't know. There's just so many examples of like we could have been completely screwed. At no fault of our own. And It's interesting because I understand now the idea of a K-shaped recovery. So V-shaped recovery would be obvious where, the stock market dips down. Stock market just representation of economy here. But like dips down real low and then sort of goes right back up. But a K-shape is where it splits by industry. So certain industries, right, seem to do very well. And then others just fucking crumple. So like cruise lines, airlines, anything in travel, anything in entertainment, anything in hospitality, all of those have not recovered at all. And then other things, I mean, if you were in online finance, like, you good, bro. You out here rolling in the money, you know?
Yeah, I find it really cool, though, to see how certain businesses that probably shouldn't have made it have learned to adapt.
Yeah.
You know, like, I remember you telling me about Nate and his job, how he had to adapt. And
event management, and they pivoted to, like, live streaming events.
Like the luxury live streaming event, you know? I think that's cool. I think that's awesome to see, you know, people adapt to different situations and figure out how to do it another way to survive, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a good note to end on, sort of like the gratitude that you and I both share for being somewhere in the middle of that, you know, where music and arts is still able, education of the music and arts is still able to, like, have some sort of platform to stand on with the internet, that people still value it enough and they have enough extra income to afford that kind of education, and that we've got these, you know, because as much as I rely on tech for my income, you do too now, right? Like a lot of virtual lessons and stuff. I mean, that was what you had to do. Mm-hmm. So just the fact that tech has come far enough, you know, and that we've got this platform that we can sort of maintain education in the arts, you know, I'm really grateful for that, because, man, 2 steps to the left and we would have been, you know, in very, very different boats, you know?
I know, or even other sectors of our industry, like some of, you know, our friends that just play out live.
Yeah.
They're having to find
that's what
other
I mean.
jobs now.
2 steps to the left if we were just gigging and not teaching.
Yeah. And you see people who are gigging now, like, coming out with, or who used to gig, you know, coming out with online material.
Sure.
You know, like trying to break in, you know.
It's
and,
rough.
Yeah, you got a few years ahead of you before you break through, you know. And by then it'll be back to normal. You can probably go gigging again. So it's, you know, kind of sucks. You just got to kind of work that 9 to 5 for a little while until it passes.
Yeah.
It just kind of sucks, you know.
Yeah, man. Well, anybody out there, we'd love to hear, what position are you in? That's a good one. You know, do you feel lucky to have been in the position you were in when all this happened, or do you feel, are you very unlucky, right?
But yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, dude, thanks for coming on,
the Orlando Drummer podcast the other day was first podcast I've ever done. This is my second, so
yeah,
it'd be cool to do this more often, just get used to it, you know.
For sure.
Not a very big public speaker, so it's a skill I would like to continue to improve.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, it's always nice with friends too, because it's not like this is our first conversation. I'm sure those podcast episodes with, like, a new guest would be very awkward in a way that this isn't, you know, because it's not like we haven't sat here for dozens of hours talking already.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right, brother, I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the next one.